This
Everyone.
conference will now be recorded.
My name is Richard Maloney. I'm the chairman of the Economic Development Commission. It's May 26th at 6:30 p.m. I wanted to welcome all participants to the meeting. Tonight we have the Economic Development Commission members along with planning staff, John Guskowski and Michael Demeta. First Selectman Erica Wachinski. We also have the superintendent here, Phil Stevens, along with members of the Economic Development Commission. So for tonight's meeting, what we would like to do is first present an overview of the capital improvement project in the South Wilmington Village, which is going to kick off sometime in the spring of 2022. This involves a LOTCIP grant through which the Capital Region of Government has allowed the town of Wilmington to apply and receive a grant for the planning and development of sidewalks and transportation in the South Wilmington Village District. So once we have presented that transportation plan to the townspeople and the participants, we'd like to move on to the second portion of the presentation, which would be the zoning regulations that we proposed for the South Wilmington Village District. Once we've completed the presentations, we're going to welcome all comments and questions from the taxpayers and interested parties. The sidewalk project will not begin until 2022. We intend to make necessary improvements to the village and just get as much bang for our buck through very careful and really deliberate planning and implementation of that project. Second, we want to discuss that draft regulations for the district that will allow appropriate economic development in an area of town that represents historic significance and some economic potential. Through this careful planning and execution of these draft regulations, we believe that we can open up some of the economic opportunity that we believe exists in the South Wilmington Village District. Our intent is to gauge the interest and determination of the townspeople and taxpayers and ask if this is the correct direction for the Economic Development Commission in the town to go in. So firstly, I would like to ask the partners in this process, that being Erica Wachinski, the first selectman, and Phil Stevens, the superintendent, to give us a bit of an overview, and then we're going to move right into the presentation with John Guskowski and Mike Demeta. So Erica, I would like to ask you first if you wanted to give some opening comments.
Sure. Thank you, Rick. So we learned of the opportunity for a LOTCIP grant. Got to go pre-COVID. So this is pre-COVID, fall of 2019. It might have even been spring of 2019 at this point. So we brought together several stakeholders to determine what of the projects we might already have in the works in Wilmington, or that we knew were of the most vital, that would fall into the parameters of this grant. What we determined was the sidewalk project between the school and the mills was going to be really the only thing we had in the works and the most beneficial to the town to use these dollars for. So the stakeholders we brought to the table, we had Mike from his planning and zoning office. We brought in some folks from CROG to talk to them about the project, the superintendent, because the school is along that route, our Parks and Rec director, as well as Public Works director, so that we could really take a look to see what we could do with the dollars that were potentially out there. We were looking at ways to capitalize on improving of the sidewalks, improving of getting from the school to potentially Hall's Pond. We utilize that route for our summer camp program. Unfortunately, the parameters of the project didn't allow us to go on some of those roads. The road itself, that the project would run along had to fall into very particular parameters, and Route 32 was that. So after much discussion, it was decided that working from the school as far as we could go with our dollars to the mills, hopefully all the way through, and taking care of that sidewalk project and that streetscape. And that was in keeping with a sidewalk committee that was formed back in 2014. And this definitely fit exactly what that committee had come up with, which was that we should be looking for grant funds so as not to burden taxpayers. And that might include some, not only a revitalization of that area, but some removal of some sidewalks in some areas. And so that's how we got to where we are today.
That's great. Thank you, Erica. Appreciate it. Do the commission members have any questions for Erica about the project? Thank you. Phil, did you have any comments to begin the presentation? I mean, you're an interested partner in this project. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, we are. I mean, I think Erica just captured kind of the process and how we kind of arrived where we are today. And obviously, Mike D'Amato had a big part in that. So obviously, the school has a vested interest if we can have quality sidewalks running that section, and you know, it's a safer spot for our students if we had any walkers in that region. So
Great. Thank you very much, Phil. So Mike, do you want to start with the transportation plan?
Sure. Sure. So I'm gonna go ahead and share the screen. And I'll let Mike, if I can. All right, can folks see that?
Yep.
Okay, I'm seeing nods. All right. So we went through this. You can, I guess, take it away, Mike.
Yeah. I think you can go to the next slide. This is just what we're going to be kind of hoping to cover today, and we're recording this so people can share it or come and review it later. But as part of the application, as Erica and Phil had mentioned, the grant is funded through CROG. It's a local transportation and capital improvement projects. That's what LOTSIP stands for. So there are very specific criteria for the types of projects that can be funded under this grant, and very specific roads that qualify for those projects. Willington being rural, you know, one of the more rural towns in CROG. Maybe there's only a handful that qualify. You know, we didn't have a lot of roads that would be eligible, so we were limited, as they said. So we landed on the South Willington Village area and trying to deal with some of the longstanding issues related to connectivity, pedestrian safety, vehicle speeds, etc. So the overview and the goal of the project was to increase pedestrian safety, reduce vehicle speeds, replace and remove existing sidewalks with code compliant sidewalks, because many of the sidewalks that are there are very narrow, they're broken, they're chipping, they don't have proper ramps, and aren't considered to be ADA accessible. We wanted to look at illumination of the access point to the school, because it doesn't currently exist. And again, where there are other crossing points within that village area, provide safe and protected upgraded crossings. So as was mentioned, we submitted the application. We submitted concept design once the application was submitted, basically showing feasibility. And then once we go through the final process of getting the application reviewed and approved by DOT and CROG, we'll then do final design, which is the next step for us. And we went to the Board of Finance in February to receive that funding. And then we will bid the actual construction. The total grant award at this point in time is $1.1 million, and there is no town match. So we are required to do the design, but there is no portion of the project which we have to fund related to the construction. Next slide. Okay, so this is just a little bit more about the project overview and the fact that we basically went through a selection process. We were part of the rural set aside, and this is because Willington is part of the Capital Region Council of Governments, which is, you know, our neighbors like Ashford, they are part of a different council of governments, so they're not eligible for these types of grants. But then we went through the process, which I outlined below. DOT review, we did concept designs, we prepared a cost estimate, that we obtained the design funds. We are now going through the DOT commitment to fund process and then final design. Next slide. All right, so these are the concept level plans, and they are, again, not to like an A2 standard, which is what we would do for like a development project that you might see. But we did use DOT survey data, so we are fairly confident in a lot of these lines. But what you will see is, well, I'm not sharing my screen, so I can't move my cursor, but working from the left side of the screen to the right, the first thing we're going to do is improve the exit point for the parking lot. We then moving towards to the right of the screen, the next thing you'll see is a pedestrian protected island in front of the school. So that will involve raised curbing, like you'll see in the photo below, to provide basically a safe point in the roadway where someone crossing, perhaps they have someone with them, or they're carrying something, or they're elderly or handicapped and they're moving more slowly, they have a safe place in the middle of the road to stop, because the speeds on the road are quite high and you may not have the time to cross the entire street. So that pedestrian protected island. The other thing that you'll see is there will now be an ADA accessible ramp, which will run from that crossing point to the parking lot, which is going to be installed by DOT. Again, right now there is no accessible entrance. So if you are parking in the parking lot on the River Road, you can't get to the school. There's no ADA crosswalk. There's no ramp. It's 4 stairs that leave you right out into the road. So we really want to upgrade that and provide that crossing point. Moving more to the right, we're going to install and realign the sidewalks in front of the school, because right now they kind of move back and forth along the road, pull them away from the road so that they're safer and they don't deal with snow when the roads are plowed, upgrade them, and then install another crossing at that point right there, which is shown. Part of the summer camp that happens at this school, they walk to the pond. And so the other thing we wanted to be cognizant of is making sure that at those crossing points, they were also safe, ADA accessible, and provided all the proper sight lines and pedestrian barriers that we basically could install. We were a bit limited based on the width of the road, in that we couldn't do much more because the lane widths are a little bit narrower than what you'd see on some other state roads. So we included those to the extent that we were able to. And then we're going to then install a new crossing, so that there will be a sidewalk from that crossing point to cross Penny Hill and continue on down towards the pond. You can go to the next slide. So here, again, we have new sidewalks, which will all be on the lower part of the screen. They will be replaced with, again, ADA compliant sidewalks of proper width. If there are any ramps or driveway access, those will all be put in to be compliant. There will be new catch basin tops and, again, a new crossing installed at Center Street. The sidewalks will then continue towards the church. Go to the next slide. And again, we are adding in conjunction with DOT another pedestrian protected crossing here. One thing that you'll see is it says provide RRFB at crosswalk. That is what's referred to as a rapid flashing beacon. Those will be at the church and at the school, so that when someone enters the crosswalk, There will be something that flashes that lets motorists know that there's someone in the crosswalk, particularly because of the speeds of this road. We want to give people that time to be able to slow down and have something that will alert them rather than just relying on sightlines alone. So those will be installed. There will be a sidewalk from the parking lot to get them there. And then again, new sidewalk continues. Further down, new crosswalk painted at Village Street. And it continues down again to the right of the screen. Next slide, John. To essentially to the mill. There will be another crosswalk and pedestrian protected island installed here. There is an existing painted crosswalk, so we're going to upgrade that and then upgrade all of the sidewalks along the mill. For anybody who kind of has been following this project, the original project that was submitted did not include sidewalk upgrades through to basically the edge of the development area here, which is where you can see the Fish and Game Club. But through working with DOT and CROG and realigning some of the grant funds and looking for a little bit of extra money because the cap was originally $1 million, we were able to at least conceptually get this entire segment completed within the grant. So we've submitted that as a modification to CROG. We're waiting for final approval from DOT, but we're anticipating constructing this entire project in one phase rather than coming back at a later date for a phase 2. And I believe that's it as far as the slides go for the lot zip. The only other thing that I'll mention is in front of the school, we are seeking approval to install illumination so that crosswalk will be lit, which I think I did mention. And then any of the sidewalks which are unconnected on the high, if you're looking at your screen, on the top of the screen, there's some very sort of in poor quality and not connected sections of sidewalk which Eversource has put light poles in and is just in bad shape and not safe. So those portions will be removed again as part of this construction. And I will leave it there. I don't know if we want to do questions now or just go right into South Wellington. It doesn't make a difference to me.
Yeah, maybe we'll stop here, Mike. That was a really comprehensive effort and presentation. Thank you very much. Any questions from the commission? Participants, Erica, I thought I saw your hand up. Did you have a question?
You did. Mike addressed the removal of sidewalks in some areas. So that was going to be my comment.
Great,
So
and I
we
think
had
it
said
was
all along that if we could extend the project to what we had originally anticipated it being, that we would, and pending a final approval, it looks like we're going to be able to do that. So we're really happy to see that the starting and stopping point of this project is going to be what we had originally identified. So I think there are certainly some folks on the call and those in this area who will be happy to hear that we're able to do this in one phase with grants, dollars.
Yeah, thank you. You know, kind of all hands on deck participation in the project. Thank you very much for doing that, because bringing it along in front of the mill, I mean, that's a huge impact, and it's just one phase. So we'll be able to do the design and engineering to bring the whole thing along. I wanted to thank John and Mike and Erica for doing that. Did a really good job on that. Yeah, any other questions?
Rick,
Yeah, go right ahead.
are you taking questions from the public at this point?
Yes, we are on this particular phase of the agenda. Yes, go right ahead, Tom.
Okay. First, let me apologize for any background noise, and if I get cut off, I'll resume once again. We're traveling in a storm on the Mass Pike right now, but this is a very important meeting, and from what I just heard, I just personally want to thank the EDC, Mike D'Amato, and the Board of Selectmen for this new news. And I'm not sure who else is on the phone from those folks that had conversations earlier in February, including St. Paul's Church, High Shade, the Eastern Connecticut Center for History, Art, and Performance. But I'm sure they all share my thoughts and thanks to all the folks that have made this happen. We've been, advocating for this for nearly a decade. We have experienced issues with pedestrian safety, which is, in our minds, a priority. We've tried to provide volunteer crossings for our events and performances, and this is just, everything appears to be coming together, and I can't thank you personally enough for making this happen.
Well, you're welcome. There's not a lot of capital improvements that we do that involve, CROG and DOT and, all the participants. But I think we've brought it together, and maybe this bodes well. We'll try to tackle a few more. Any other questions about the project?
I had a question. Yes, this is Toffer Logan.
Yes, Toffer, go ahead.
My question is about the intersection at Center Street. I don't know if you can pull that slide up or if John can go back to that slide. I'm wondering about the you're putting a crosswalk there for safety, which is great, but it's been a dangerous intersection for motorists trying to pull out of Center Street onto 32 because of the foliage and tree and shrubbery that blocks all view of northbound traffic. And I'm wondering if that's been addressed at all in the plans.
Right. Well, thank you. The intent is to take those types of comments so that when we're doing final planning, engineering, and design, that we can take that into consideration. Mike, was there any comments you had on that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and maybe I didn't hit on it strongly enough. One of the things I still sort of don't acknowledge it because it seems like it never happens, but this project has become possible because we've worked so closely with DOT, and work they are deciding to do has given us the savings, which has allowed us to expand the project. So that's a long way of saying a lot of the work in front of the school and in front of the church, which is kind of the area we're talking about now, will be conducted by DOT. So what we can do is we can let them know that there perhaps maybe some sightline issues, particularly as looking at engineering that crosswalk in front of the school, the church, just to the right of where we can see here. They may want to look at that, and we can certainly relay that to them and see if there's anything we can do. But when the final designs are done, which is where the surveys are done and they go out and actually really sharpen the pencil, we can certainly look at that and see if there are things that can be done to improve safety.
Great, thank you.
Okay, to be clear, my question was not about the crosswalk from the church to across 32, but rather the safety of the corner of someone entering 32 from Center Street, particularly the invisible traffic that is coming northbound.
Right, and the intention is always to try to slow that traffic down to improve the sight lines. So those are the overarching, goals of this project. So we hope that as final design is implemented, that we'll be able to address that. Okay, any more questions? Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Emilia Hinchliff. I live on the corner of right next to Hall Church at 136. I've got Fred's old place. We don't actually have a sidewalk in the front of our property. there is instead stairs and a retaining wall that kind of pretty much keeps part of our basement up. And I'm wondering, there is no existing sidewalk, so I'm just checking to see whether or not this is a relevant conversation for us or not, because the current sidewalk ends at the church property line, and I'm just wondering whether or not that's going to stay that way.
Yep, let's talk about that. Mike, go ahead.
So as part of this plan, and you can see here, there is the retaining wall, which is being provided as part of the grant, a reconstruction of the steps which are there to facilitate that sidewalk, to extend it, to continue it, because that's one of the main issues that we have, is that if the sidewalk ends, they can't cross the street, so then it needs to be contiguous. So the sidewalk will be then extended and continue towards the mill.
Okay, I apologize because I lost audio at some point, so I missed the full presentation for that area. So we're talking about then losing basically my whole entire front yard. Is that correct?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say it's correct. You're going to lose your whole front yard. There will be a sidewalk there, but part of what's there now between the current travel way and the state right of way, I don't know what the actual distance would be. We're not talking about an 8-foot sidewalk.
There's only 6 feet from my front step to the top of those stairs. So, and there's a tree that's on if you continue that sidewalk, that means also the tree in my front yard is affected.
Okay, so I don't have, like I said, these are concept level plans. So, I mean, what I can do is we can set up a time you can either come in, or we can go through the plans together on, so you can look at them rather than on a screen here, and I can kind of try to dial it in for you to give you a better idea. I don't have anything more in front of me other than this, because they're concept level, but I will tell you, we're not planning on right-of-way acquisition for this, portion of the project, where we're going to be, like I said, installing some 8-foot sidewalk or crossing or anything beyond that. It would just be to facilitate the continuation of the existing.
Right, but no, that definitely is claiming, that is a right of way, and it is claiming a piece of my property, because really my front porch is right there. So you're talking about actually people now being within an arm's reach of my front door now, whereas they weren't prior. I mean, we constantly have people walking across our property, jumping down the retaining wall that holds up, the front part of the yard. But I mean, so that is very intrusive on our property.
Good. So why don't you schedule time with Mike so that you can really dial that in, and we'd like to hear additional comments from you once you see what the scope of that is going to be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And not to jump in on that, but Mike, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the sidewalk will be built northerly of, well, not northerly, I guess, what is that? Westerly of the retaining wall. Like the retaining wall will be reconstructed, and the sidewalk will go beyond it towards the road. So there will actually be a pedestrian pathway away from the retaining wall, such that people won't have to walk across that or jump down off of it. It'll provide clear pedestrian access away from that.
Right, but I mean that also is the destruction of my front stairs, because any sidewalk is going to go right through basically the front stairs that I have there.
Right, which are, well, I mean, they're proposed to be reconstructed. They're not proposed to be lost, but yeah, we can have you look at the detail with Mike.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions about the transportation plan?
Yeah, someone's raising their hand, but you're muted. Kuldip, you were muted.
Anybody else? Do you see anybody, John?
Nobody is indicating.
Okay, good. Great. So let's move on to South Willington Village proposed zoning regulations, these are in a draft form right now. And the intention of the Economic Development Commission in proposing these draft regulations is to allow some additional opportunities for residents and businesses in this zone to enhance where and as appropriate the uses of their property. Some of the uses will be required by simple sign off by a zoning agent, and others will be by a special permit with plan designs. Anything basically that is new construction is going to be a bit of a plan design and a special permit. But what this will allow businesses and residents in the village to do is utilize properties as they had been historically prior to this area being zoned strictly residential, where many of the special uses could not be applied. So Mike, go right ahead and give us your thoughts on the zoning regs. Thanks.
So actually, Rick, I'll take this.
Oh, John. Okay, great. Thank you, John. Yep.
So, okay. So as Rick said, the Economic Development Commission has been looking to basically assist in the implementation of the town's master plan, the Plan of Conservation and Development. And one of the critical elements that was identified in the master plan, as well as identified by the Economic Development Commission itself and several residents of South Willington Village and other stakeholders, has identified, the need to get more activity, some revitalization in the South Willington Village area. And as Rick had alluded to, the current zoning regime for this area is not particularly friendly to the sort of variety of uses that have either been historically present, and you all know as residents and as folks who love Willington, there's an incredible variety of historic uses in South Willington. And the current regulations really don't anticipate or wouldn't allow for that to be reconstructed. Certainly not easily, and particularly not, in a mixed nature. And for folks who are familiar with the regulations surrounding the millworks and that area, know that every time there's a new tenant, regardless of if it's an office use, a retail use, personal services, a new whole set of permits has to happen, and sometimes they need a complicated set of regulatory hoops to jump through. So we wanted to sort of simplify this to make it easy to do the right thing in South Willington, but in a way that was sensitive to the really important and valuable historic character that makes South Willington what it is. So we want to, sort of restore the variety, restore the vitality by updating the regulations, but obviously keep a focus on the character. So a couple of the things that we sought to do in this regulation, what you'll see on the screen again, is to make things easier to do. Because developers, generally speaking, don't like to circumvent the rules. They like their permitting paths to be absolutely clear and as easy as possible. And property owners want to know exactly what they're able to do with their property and what they can't do. So what we wanted to make it is identify what good development would be, and then make that regulatory path as easy and clear as possible. So that's sort of the first two sections. And then again, to recognize that South Willington had this great variety of historical uses, and basically to use those properties and make it easier to make something economically viable in places like the millworks. And if there's, if at some point in the future the Hall School won't be a school anymore, we want to make sure that there are options to make sure that we never have to tear these facilities down, that we can reuse them in a way that complements the district. So we wrote a purpose statement, which is hopefully the first thing that anyone would see when they're thinking about a project in South Willington. And again, we've written out the purpose of the regulations, and this is in a draft of the regulations itself. And again, the key there is to encourage adaptive reuse, redevelopment, and reinvestment along this corridor by, to seek a balanced growth and an efficient use of the land. I don't know how well people can see this on their relatively small screens, but we laid out several objectives of the regulations. So particularly when you have what's called a special permit or a special exception process, it's a judgment call for the Planning and Zoning Commission to accept or reject a proposal that's going through a special permit process. And so when the commission is making that decision on whether or not to allow a particular use, they go through the objectives of the regulations and ask themselves, does this proposal satisfy the objectives, which are, again, creative and flexible redevelopment with design standards, encouraging redevelopment that's consistent with the plan of conservation and development, encouraging mixed use, developing a system of incentives to stimulate the adaptive reuse, to create a compact blend of land uses. So it's not just single family residences. It would be a blend of multifamily, it would be a blend of commercial, retail, institutional, public spaces, and then to also connect these things, these variety of uses and buildings through safe pedestrian networks that obviously we talked about today. The sidewalk up Route 32 is a major component of that. And then to activate those properties that are underutilized, perhaps blighted, that need some fixing up, and making them more economically viable is often the best way to prevent properties from falling into disrepair. And then, perhaps most importantly, to really reinforce the critical historic design palette of South Wilmington. So those are the overall objectives of the regulations. And so what we did, and this is, zoning is not necessarily the sexiest thing, but when you do zoning, you have to think about, well, what are the uses? What are the allowable uses? What are the maybe allowable uses under certain circumstances? And what are the absolutely prohibited uses? And so what we've done is a whole variety of potential uses, from medical offices, art galleries, single family dwellings, cafes, retail, you can see the list. And to basically make it much, much easier to flexibly to flexibly put in place some of these uses in existing structures. So you'll see under, we have this bifurcated into existing structure or new construction. And in almost all cases, if you have an existing structure, the universe of potential uses has gotten a lot wider under these proposed regulations. So if you have an existing structure, it could be a house, a single family, two family, it could be medical offices, it could be personal services, it could be retail, it could be a cafe. But if you're going to build something new, then we have a little bit more of a complicated process, a special permit process, because we want to make sure that the new structure and the new facility fits from a design perspective, from a context perspective. So we have some additional uses. Certainly restaurants and brew pubs, we want to start encouraging. For instance, some things that we don't want: drive-through facilities, motor vehicle service and repair, not appropriate as in the judgment of the Economic Development Commission, who helped draft this regulation. Those are not the sorts of commercial uses that we want to see in historic South Wilmington Village, because they don't fit the context. They may be appropriate in other places in town, but not South Wilmington Village. And similarly, to reflect sort of the historic mill properties, light manufacturing and processing, assembly, artisan spaces, live work spaces are all appropriate and reflective of the historic uses of South Wilmington. And so those are all special permit uses. And the key is to, again, not say no to things right off the bat, but to make sure that they would fit into the historic character. And so some of those additional considerations that we want to include into this regulatory environment is to allow for some flexible parking, because we know space is limited, and particularly in some of our most historic structures. So we want to be a little bit more flexible to not require oceans of parking that may never get filled, may only get filled once or twice a year. We want to make sure that people can sort of park in a scattered way around the village, and that's again why it's important that we have strong pedestrian connections. So if there's an event at the millworks, for instance, people might feel comfortable parking down across from the school and walking up the sidewalk, because it's a very short distance and it's a very safe pedestrian connection. So we don't have to overbuild our parking. We are adding design standards to make sure that the architecture of the new buildings themselves, particularly, and overall site design in terms of landscaping, in terms of signage, in terms of orientation of the buildings to the streets and location of parking to the rear where possible, is all reinforcing and reflective of the historic character of the village. And that is what is possible through a set of design standards, as well as the special exception process, because then that gives the Planning and Zoning Commission a lot of latitude to make sure that the design fits. And so the next steps for that, again, this is a proposal from the Economic Development Commission, and it will be submitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission as a formal zoning application, a formal text amendment, which will be received by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then the Planning and Zoning Commission, per their rules and the state statutes, will hold another public hearing to consider whether to adopt this proposal, this zoning proposal, as part of their overall zoning regulations, at which time then, if it was approved, would become part of the zoning regulations and would enable property owners and developers along the South Wilmington Village a lot more, I think, flexible opportunity to do something creative and reflective of the historic character of South Wilmington Village with their property. And Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, John. I mean, I just I can't stress enough that this isn't your your grandfather's Chevy. I mean, this is a new kind of concept, new type of flexible design. You have done a great job putting pen to paper and giving us a really flexible and appropriate design for this village district. Thank you very much. So I'd ask if there are any questions. Adam, go ahead.
Yes, I'm just to get a reference point here. I'm from South Wellington. I live in South Wellington, and I just want to see, is there any other residents of South Wellington on the call or in the zoning board? Do we have any representation? Is anyone a resident of South Wellington on the zoning board currently?
No, Adam, but that's the reason that we wanted to have this informational meeting. And what we did is we sent out notices to all of the residents of South Wilmington to make sure that you're all on board. We don't want to do this and then, we don't want to remake a village, remake the zoning, unless the South Wilmington Village residents want us to do it, Adam. Yeah.
Okay, and to that end, what is the so to ensure that we get the input, or at least a to be able to determine what the desire of the South Wellington residents here, how are we planning to do that formally?
Sure. So this is the first step. We've mailed notices. I think we mailed 40 different notices to all the abutters in the South Wilmington Village District. So now they're going to get another bite at the apple here, because now we go and have a public hearing. We'll go to zoning, planning and zoning, and actually have a hearing, and they'll get another chance to oppose or accept these zoning regs.
But regardless of the desire of the residents of South Wellington to either adopt or reject this zoning change proposal for South Wellington District, Village District, the zoning board has the power to approve it or reject it regardless of our input, correct?
Sure, but this is really the opportunity now, and we're going to keep this open for the next month. So if anybody wants to write to us, they can meet with us. We're happy to come down to the South Wilmington Village and talk with them and meet with them. And if there's opposition to this proposal, we're going to stop dead in our tracks, and we won't forward it to planning and zoning as a recommendation. So this really is the opportunity to stop us in our tracks or amend the proposal.
Okay, I was just trying to see where the demand from the residents was. I wasn't sure. Do we have any? Is there any proposed building projects from residents for mixed usage where this would be a benefit to them that are currently in the application process?
Sure. So historically, the mill, you have to, if you're going to have any type of a business, any type of a use in the mill, you've got to go to Zoning Board of Appeals and get approval. So, we wanted to make this use to be much more consistent and amicable to what exists there currently. There was an overlay that was done decades ago that was a residential overlay that precluded any type of small business, any type of commercial activity in this zone. So we just want to make it more flexible and more useful for the residents there, that if they wanted to, have a medical office building, they could actually do that.
So, but to clarify, there has been no applications or no applications currently in process for residents to have a mixed usage currently.
I mean, other than the mill, which we have multiple applications before the town every year, there's been no residential requests. That's correct, because they're precluded from doing it. So they haven't proposed to do something that the zoning regs would never allow them to do.
Right, but there currently is a mixed usage capability within the zoning regulations.
Yeah, but not in this zone.
For special permit, there's mixed usage capability.
Sure, but
R80.
it can't be in the residential zone. So you've got a residential zone that's set up here, so you can't come in and have that mixed use within the residential zone. Actually, the mill is within the residential zone, so we want to make that change.
Okay, so the mill is commercial usage right now. They're not a resident, so the demand right now is from the mill, not residents. So that's correct.
Correct. That's right. Yep. John, did you have anything you wanted to add? Oh, I'm sorry, Adam. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, please go ahead.
I'd like to add something.
Sure. Go right ahead, Samantha.
Hi, my name's Samantha. Adam, I don't know if your concern is, obviously you're a resident there. You don't want to see all this traffic. You don't want to see all this people in and out. I'm not really sure if that is your concern that you're not saying, but what you just said, that the demand has come from the mill, I just wanted to clarify that if this isn't coming from the mill necessarily, that the EDC is at the whim of the owner of the mill. I don't even know the owner of the mill, but I'm on economic development, and what we see, or at least what I see as a member, is a vision of a walkable area where families would want to come and, where we would develop economically, where we would be able to harvest some of those tax dollars, but nothing that would be intrusive. Or I've lived here almost my whole life, so I love our town, and we're not going to do something that's going to bring in, it's going to deny your voice. So I just wanted to make that clear, that there's a vision for the area that doesn't come from the mill, but comes from members. And you are definitely, I think we have open seats on economic development as well. And you would love to have you.
That's right, Samantha. We would love to have Adam on the commission. You got that right. Can we sign you up, Adam?
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
There's some alternates on planning and zoning, Adam, if that interests you.
Yeah, my concern is that with the zoning, there is no representation in the zoning board from anyone within this district that's being created. So, that just, the optics don't look good on that.
So,
Yeah, and that's why we wanted to do this, have this public outreach. I mean, we didn't want to just forward our draft proposal to planning and zoning and have them have a hearing without having everybody to have an opportunity to take a bite at this apple, please give us your comments. I mean, would you prefer to have these uses in the village, or would you not prefer to have these uses in the village?
The issues that I have with, I mean, a village district in general, comes from, I mean, as a resident of South Burlington, for residential usage, I see no benefits to having the village district. I just don't. In fact, it's more restrictive, if anything, and it puts a burden on me for the new construction. It says any new construction requires a special permit, which is interesting because it's listed under usage, allowed usage, and I didn't know that construction was a usage.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, Adam. To be clear, this is not a village district, per 82J of the Connecticut General Statute. So there's no design review for as of right uses such as single family residences. You'd not face any additional regulatory burden unless you were looking to change the use of your property to something far more intrusive.
Okay. The under the allowed usage, I think it's section C. The new construction. Any new construction requires a special permit, regardless if it's a doghouse.
Okay, I'll have to take a look at the specific reg that you're talking about, but I suspect we probably need to clarify that to explain that. Yeah, we're not. It would be. You're right. I get your point, and the intent is not to apply to, if you're adding a dormer or something like that, or if you're adding a deck out the back. That's not what the intent of the reg is. And we can make an amendment to clarify that.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, the new construction. I mean, this is a usage. Manufacturing, storage, self-storage, agriculture. Those are all usage, but new construction is not a use. You know what I mean?
I think that the purpose is to ensure that a use established through new construction requires the special permit, not just any new construction, but we can make that more clear. One thing that I just wanted to point out is that John had mentioned that one of the things that we look to do is to implement the long range goals of the town through what is written in the Plan of Conservation and Development. That is a 10-year document which was not created in a vacuum. And so, the POCD is a reflection of the public process that was conducted, was developed. So the recommendations within it for West Wellington and South Wellington Village and all these other areas of town by the highways, et cetera, are all those recommendations, those goals, all those implementation recommendations come from that public process. So the Planning and Zoning Commission is obligated by statute to consider what the POCD says when they adopt new regulations. So if the POCD says, that they need to expand the commercial corridors and do this and that, and we should limit our residential development because schools are at their capacity, well, it might not be the best thing for them to then adopt a regulation which changes a commercial zone to residential. They're required to review that document and make sure that a new text change or purchase of property, or a lot of these things are consistent. So we are trying to develop a regulation using the POCD's recommendation for South Wellington as the foundation, which was developed publicly.
Okay. Yeah, I do see some of the development process here, and I understand it. Just some of the way that it's come out and the interpretations of it. There's just questions. If I continue, the parking plan, for instance, parking access and loading. I think it's section D, item 2. All applications of zoning permit or special permit contain a parking plan, and it should, it goes on. Parking demand including peak hours. I fail to see how this applies to residential usage. In fact, it puts a burden on residents for these requirements. Beyond what it would be required now.
So the only, and we're getting in the weeds, and these are good comments, but the only reason that a resident would be required to come up with a parking plan is if they were converting their property to something else.
But it says all applications for a zoning permit shall contain, and it shall be, it goes through that there. It doesn't say that it requires for a special permit. So if I'm not changing my usage, it still will apply.
Well, if you're not changing your use, you wouldn't. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. You wouldn't.
Yeah, not changing the usage. Yeah.
And well, I mean, yes, but the parking plan, if all you're doing is adding a deck, your parking plan is, I don't need to change my parking.
But it still has to have these requirements, et cetera, which again, it's unclear if the intention of this regulation is for mixed usage or a usage change. Well, then it should, explain that more clearly. As it is right now, it's being applied broadly, and I think it was a burden on residents.
I see what you're saying. We need to clarify those things. Yeah.
And the last thing I have is on the site design standards. New construction or substantial improvements. I mean, some of these again I find are. Is this for a usage change or existing usage?
Oh, so the way it reads is substantial improvements requiring site plan modification as defined within the section. So again, a residential use modification doesn't require a site plan modification. You don't need to come back to the commission for it because, again, residences is an as of right use. So that wouldn't get triggered in that case. Because
it's just not very clear though. That's all.
Understood.
The other issue I have is with the building height requirement, 35 feet. It's lower than the residential R80, which is 40. So.
Is that right? I'll defer to your zoning officer on that. But we can talk about that.
Okay, I understand what your purposes are here, but I just think it's not clear, and just some clarifications on these things would certainly help alleviate any confusion.
Yeah, those are great suggestions. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Adam.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. No, thank you. Any other comments from commission members or the public?
So I just had one final question. So
I'm sorry, is that Emilia? Go ahead. Nope, we lost her. Samantha, did you have a question?
I just want to ask. I want to ask a clarifying question of Adam. You had just mentioned something about the 80/40 or something that's height or something.
Sorry.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, it's just Emilia. Can you just wait a second and
the initial
go ahead and
packet
mute,
that we received.
Thank you. Go ahead, Samantha.
I don't know if she heard. No,
Yeah, she did.
You had mentioned that you had an issue with that, and now were you saying that you wanted further clarification between a residential versus a residential commercial space for the height, or that you were seeing a potential issue with the height disturbing your peace as a resident in that area, that you don't really want to see a height requirement change? Or
I find, there's no, as a resident, having that, restriction there, it's 35 feet. I mean, if you were to have, the residential requirement right now for R80 is 40 feet. So, and, I've been working on plans for a building, I think it's 38 feet, because of the garage, but that's an issue. And I see no benefit as for residential usage, the restriction, as long as we're following with the standard zoning practices. I mean, I understand it's you don't want to have mixed usage, some giant tower, understood, if it's right near the property line, I understand the setbacks and stuff, but it just seems to be a little bit of a burden for residential usage.
Okay.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. I mean, we probably want to use as a minimum that residential standard. Thank you, Samantha.
All right, thanks. I just wanted to clarify, so
thank
taking note.
Great. Amelia, are you there? Can you hear us?
I am, but I think I might be having audio issues. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, that's much better. Go right ahead.
Sorry, so the initial maps that were supposed to be included in the packet we received were not there. Are those available for us to pick up either at the town hall or somewhere else?
Are you referring to the maps for the sidewalks or the maps for the zoning?
I don't know. The letter I received said a copy of the proposed regulation text and map indicating the area to be discussed has been included. There was no map in my packet.
Yeah, so we can, I can do a couple of things. We can basically post all of this on the website, so it can be viewed. The map that was supposed to be included, which when it went to print was in there, so I apologize if you didn't receive it, was the maps for the South Willington project. The purpose of this discussion was to try to flesh out if we needed to tweak the extent of the zoning overlay that we're kind of talking about. We're talking now about the regulatory standards, and then we would look at the extent of where that would apply. But we can post all that. You can call, we can email it to you, whatever's most convenient.
I appreciate that, because in speaking with one of my neighbors across the street, she was under the impression this didn't pertain to her because it's mentioned specifically the school and the mill area, but she, like I, am in the same position without a sidewalk. So if, we weren't really sure exactly how it was going to affect us, but I think that people were under the impression that it wasn't going to affect them.
Yeah, so certainly anybody can call the office and we can print a copy. They can come review it. We'd be happy to email it. This whole presentation will be posted online so they can review all of what's been discussed and shown. But the maps are easier to see at the scale when they're printed. So if that's easiest, you can call the office and we'd be happy to print them out.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Amelia. Any other questions from commission members, participants, partners, commission members, anybody?
Rick,
Yep, go right ahead.
this is Tom Bacino. Just a couple of comments, and thank you for having this meeting. I wanted to just clarify one point. I think it might have been discussed earlier, and I'm sorry I dropped out here for a while. But just to clarify, with respect to the millworks, we did not make any demand. Hello?
Yep, we can hear you, Tom. Go right ahead.
We did not make any demand for change in these regulations. We've been complying with the process that has been in place for seeking special exception permits when we do have changes of use. So I just wanted to clarify that. I'm pleased with the direction that you folks are making in terms of these proposed changes, and I think they'll be very beneficial and business friendly, as well as providing some benefits to residential use. So that's one thing. I just wanted to clarify that. And then secondly, I just wanted to again thank all the folks involved here from the town that are demonstrating really a long-term vision for part of the town that has had such a significant impact on Willington. And this area that we're speaking about was once a bristling hub of town and referred to as Main Street. The Vibrant Community Initiative grant that was awarded to the town and the resulting report did, I believe, recommend some changes to the zoning regs to make this area a bit more viable for growth and economic development and, cultural assets as well. So I can just say that I'm pleased with the vision the town has taken. And, thank you again for the work that you've done.
Thank you, Tom. Any other questions? Great. So what is this process going to look like going forward? So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of more or less hold this open, allow people to comment, come in, talk to us. We're happy to go out to the South Wilmington Village District. I'll come out, I'll meet with people, whatever anybody would like to do. You know, for example, Adam, if you want to have more input, we want to keep this open for a while so that, you know, we can continue the conversation. And then what we'll do is we'll meet as an Economic Development Commission, and we will draft these final regulations and move them forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So if there's no additional comments or questions, we're going to go ahead and end the meeting.
One last thing. When's
Yes,
the
go right
next
ahead.
PZC meeting?
Be the second Wednesday of the month, so that would be, well, we may not have that though, because
PZC,
we're bumping right up against that time frame. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
he was asking about planning and zoning.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, planning and zoning, I'm not so sure. Erica, do you know?
So
I'll defer to Mike.
we usually meet. We usually meet the second and fourth Tuesday, but I'm not sure based on our agenda. The next meeting may be canceled. I've got to work with the chairman, but this is not something. If you're looking to talk about this, it's not something that we've taken up yet. But if you're just looking to participate or attend or watch, just look for the agendas or shoot me an email. It's twice a month.
And can I say, I know, Adam, you had some concerns about representation from different areas of town on different boards or commissions, and I'd be happy if you want to reach out to my office to talk to you about ways that residents could participate in that process. We always hope for a wide range of folks to participate, but it's up to the individual.
Okay. Yeah, it's a tough climate for that this time.
It is. I hear you.
Thank you.
Okay, last call. Hearing none. Hopefully we'll get a brew pub in the village and we can all come over and enjoy a beverage. Okay, thank you all. We're going to end the meeting.